After countless generations of grinding effort, humanity finally birthed true magic. Not a planned breakthrough, but the next inevitable leap. And they quickly bound that power to blood, scheming to make it hereditary, and hunting ways to force it into their descendants. When magic started erupting in ordinary people, the creators sealed their breakthroughs into bloodlines, making magic hereditary, because blood passes from parent to child. Ustia wears the title Nation of Magic like a crown. Nobles unleash magic to shield the people from invaders and monsters, and for that service they command towering status and sweeping privileges. Among the country's magical nobility, the house of Marquis Frenbridge towers above the rest, and Hermes, the family's infant, is already fated to inherit the title. Even as a child, raw magic crackled through him and the world crowned him a prodigy. The Frenbridge family once wore the duke's crown. When none of their heirs bore magic, their lands and prestige were ripped away. They were demoted to Marquis, branded a fallen house, and every last hope pinned to Hermes. They hailed him as the miracle who would drag their family back to greatness. 4 years later, Hermes bolts to his father's side, breathless and bursting to tell him that praise showered him in magic lessons. The teacher declared he had the greatest potential of any student his age, and his proud father boasts he'll become the most outstanding mage in the family. Everyone hails Hermes, piling impossible expectations on him. His father dreams he'll equal the kings of legend and their great ancestors. Peers stare with admiration. Teachers lean in hungry to gauge the strength of his inherited magic, and Hermes soaks it all up with unshakable confidence and fierce determination. Hermes's father hurls scorn and sharp comparisons at his brother every time he fails to summon the same magical spark. Hermes stands tall as the shining example, while Chris gets branded pathetic. Family magic isn't taught, it's inherited. A raw power that runs in the blood, leaping from parent to child across generations. Hermes hatches a plot with Katya, his childhood friend and heiress of another duchy, tightening the noose around Chris. Hermes declares family magic belongs only to nobles and steamrolls ordinary spells with raw power. But Katya bails on his lecture to play, and he barrels on, breathless and wrapped with magic talk. Hermes vows to become a mighty, heroic mage like the legendary figures he admires, and Katya, seeing the fierce love he holds for magic, fans that spark with steady encouragement, sure he'll make it. With that goal burning in his chest, Hermes pushed himself every day, growing stronger and sharper until he turned 7. During Hermes's magic test, the expert's eyes go cold. He can't sense a single thread of family magic in Hermes. A power that should have manifested already never shows. The truth hits like a thunderclap, silencing everyone and forcing Hermes to admit he doesn't have the power they'd pinned their hopes on. The kingdom's evaluator slammed down the verdict. Hermes harbors no magic. Level 0. The news slams into his father. Disbelief pins him as he can't accept the family heir failed, while others wail that God did not favor Hermes, insisting inherited magic hinges on pure blood, and that fate, not merit, hands out power. Hermes's father, hollowed by disappointment, collapses into despair when he realizes every scheme to reclaim the dukedom through his son has shattered. Rage exploded through him. He spat worthless at Hermes and pummeled him mercilessly, totally ignoring the boy's stunned suffering. After the attack on Hermes, his father locked him up and unleashed a savage tirade, branding him worthless and insisting he be thrown out onto the street. He snarls he's so disgusted he won't even breathe the same air as his son. Hermes reels, stunned and confused, calling out to him in vain. Ernie throws himself at his father's feet, voice raw as he begs for another chance, and swears he'll train harder and do anything to become the mage his father dreamed of. His father sneers, clamps the label defective product on him, and turns him away. He roared that without ancestral magic he'd never blaze into the sun he dreamed of, and spat that Hermes had been abandoned by the god of stars and was therefore unworthy. Hermes's father roars that he's no gift from God but a demon's descendant, and will only let him go if, by some miracle, he can wield the family magic. Doubt claws at him. He leaves and locks the cell, and Hermes is left alone. The instant that shatters his life and forges a new one. Locked behind bars and drowning in despair, Hermes replays brighter days as panic surges. He can't call on his ancestral magic, and the thought he'll never escape devours him. Just when everything seemed lost, his brother Chris burst up before the cell, flashed a cryptic smile and called out, and Ernie's eyes snapped to him. He knew him instantly. Chris explodes in, declaring he's here to teach magic to his poor little brother, then flashes a cocky grin and proves he knows everything. He throws his powers into the spotlight, crowing that God chose him. a showman's grin spreading as he detonates a blast of magic that leaves Hermes stunned. Chris hurls Hermes' own magic at him, sneering that it will awaken his brother's dormant power, and watches with a cruel grin as it takes hold. Hermes is hurled against the wall, wounded and gasping, while Chris glares down with icy contempt and spits. Pathetic, Chris snarls, admitting he's punishing Hermes for brushing him off, even though Hermes is their father's favorite. Hermes reels as realization slams into him. He never once considered his brother's feelings. He'd been drunk on praise and the thrill of learning magic, blind to how deprived Chris felt. And now guilt crushes him. Chris roars that he'll seize Hermes' place as heir and become the great magician he's always dreamed of, while Hermes, bound and humiliated, sobs in silence as Chris laughs and strides away. Moments later, a girl rushes to the cell, concern clawing at her voice as she asks if he's okay. Katya bursts in to find Hermes battered and chained, realizes his father and Chris are behind it, and shock slams into her like a physical blow. Helplessness roared through her when she couldn't heal him. She gripped his hand and choked out an apology. No one, not even with magic, should have to endure that. Hermes, voice low and humble, admits he's broken and pleads for just a chance to eat. Katya cuts him off decisively. She swears she believes in him. He hungers for magic more than anyone and trains and toils relentlessly. She refuses to accept that he has no magic in his blood, and she vows she'll never leave him, no matter what. Katya locks eyes with Hermes and vows, voice blazing, that he'll become a great magician and stand beside her again. Her words light a fire in Hermes. He digs in and swears he won't quit, remembering he can leave if he unlocks his ancestral magic, and with a new, fierce smile vows to keep trying while thanking Katya for reigniting his hope. Kutcher's cover is blown. She steels herself, strides for the door, and hisses that nothing angers her more than watching loved ones dragged into a cell. She slams down a fierce promise that he'll escape, swearing it's unbreakable, and Hermes' smile blooms again, bright with hope that this is the start of change. Bruised and broken in that hellish place, Hermes relentlessly hunted for his magic from dawn to dusk. His ferocious resolve to break free, stoked by Katya's unwavering support, launched him into action. Those two pillars kept his spirit blazing and hammered his resilience into iron as he charged through his quest. 3 brutal years of pushing himself to the bone, and Hermes still hadn't moved an inch. When he sees Katya again, joy explodes through him. But he soon learns she won't be coming back. Katya offers a sorrowful apology that leaves Hermes stunned and bewildered. Katya screams she'll be forced into marriage with Aster, the second prince, the most powerful living wielder of hereditary magic and the main contender for the throne. She declares that, as the duchy's heiress, it's an honor she must accept and she has no reason to refuse. Hermes, stunned, gasps, "Are you really going to accept?" Katya begs to push the wedding back for at least 6 months. But Chris storms in, flanked by guards, and shatters her last chance. He announces that her engagement to Prince Aster has catapulted the Frenbridge family back into high nobility, leaving Hermes and Katya stunned by Chris's ice-cold resolve and relentless determination. Katya explodes in fury on learning the prince refuses to see Hermes, and Chris, drunk on pride, crows that his talent has made him Prince Aster's right hand. He barked that the entire Frenbridge family serves the prince, ordered Hermes kept locked away by his direct command, and slammed the door on any chance of reconsideration. Prince Aster snaps that he needs no one without magic, and ruthlessly orders Hermes eliminated. Obedient, Chris barked for the guards to seize Hermes, and they dragged him off as Katya, outraged by the cruelty, lunged to stop them but was forcefully restrained. As he was wrenched away, Hermes shouted to Katya, and she swore she'd speak to the prince to get him freed. Katya screams Hermes' name as Hermes, silent and consumed, obsesses over how to win his father's love and God's favor. Left to suffer and starving for recognition, he aches for approval and can't fathom why he's so despised. Hermes jolts awake in a filthy, forsaken place, blinking into grime and neglect while terrified. Suffering people press around him. Disoriented, he can't tell where he is. Suspicious stares claw at his nerves and drag him into crushing loneliness. A pack of men, their smiles sharp as knives, closed in on Hermes and sneered. "Are you alone?" The moment he spots the danger, panic explodes. He scrambles to escape, every breath crushed by rising fear. Despair clamps down like a vice. He pictures Katya and begs anyone to save him as the horror of total helplessness crashes over him. Hermes bolts for freedom, but burly hands seize him mid-run. They taunt him for striding alone like a nobleman. One sneers he'll stay with them, another clamps onto him. Hermes thrashes and pleads to be let go, but he's ringed by them and hopelessly outmatched. The attackers tear into a debate over Hermes' fate, sell him or chain him as a slave, then coldly brand him too weak to fetch even a ransom. Seething with hatred for the nobility, They swarm Hermes and pummel him senseless, snarling that killing him would be mercy. He lies sprawled on the floor, battered and powerless, staring into the raw horror of human cruelty. Hermes, bloodied and desperate, questions if every sacrifice was wasted. An attacker closes in, knife flashing and grin cruel. And Hermes, after pouring everything into earning recognition, feels death surge toward him and, in a raw panic, refuses to let it end here. As the attackers lunged at Hermes with a knife, a jagged bolt of lightning tore into them, stopping the assault cold. From the background, a formidable woman emerges, strides forward with iron resolve and barks, "Stop!" Wounded and crumpled on the ground, Hermes stares in stunned disbelief as the terrified bandits all turn and fix their eyes on her. She glares at the stage and snaps that she'd come home in a good mood, only to find a group of adults beating a child. Sickened, she snarls, "Disgusting," and says her day is ruined. Hermes looks at her, surprised and embarrassed by her striking presence. She locks them in a razor-sharp, confident stare, and snarls she'll relish beating those cowards. Rage boiled in the bandits' veins, suspicion sharpening every glare. They bellowed for her to step back, and their magic circles flared to life in a blaze of runes. Unflinching, she meets their gaze, then with a single devastating strike shatters every attacker, sending them flying while she stands calm and elegant amid the ruins. Shock jolts Hermes. She curls a mocking smile and snaps, "It was all terrible." Hermes gapes as the woman rips fire, ice and wind from the air in one furious sweep. He can't fathom it. Ancestral magic should bind someone to a single element. The spell detonates, tearing everything around to ruins, and he reels as the truth slams into him. It's ordinary magic, but its power is cataclysmic. Hermes gapes, frozen, as every head snaps toward her, recognizing the woman's staggering power. They call her the walking catastrophe. Rose, a sky witch whose terrifying appearance and cataclysmic magic leave everyone trembling. Rose snaps, fury blazing at being underestimated, sneers that it took them too long to recognize her, scolds them for dismissing simple magic as weak, then steels herself and vows to unleash her true power, promising the display as a gift. Rose begins to intone a titanic spell as a colossal magic circle blossoms behind her. Solemn and unshakable, she proclaims she'll unleash magic worthy of her position, power that reaches beyond sky and earth, and the air crackles with energy, while her enemies freeze in fear. Rose roars and ignites Hlidskjalf, her powerful ancestral sorcery, and a blinding light floods the entire vicinity. Her strike slammed into them dead on. The thugs froze, utterly unable to react, and that raw power announced she was on another plane. An elite mage, Rose eyed the fallen and spat that she hadn't killed them, only neutralized them, sneering they weren't worth dirtying her hands, then glided to Hermes and assured him he was safe. The boy, stunned and relieved, stared up at the woman who'd saved him so easily and with crushing power. Hermes bellows to warn Rose that a distant magical bolt is hurtling in from behind. She whips around, locks onto the threat, and with a single devastating strike obliterates the building that launched the attack, coldly noting the shooter was indeed there, and admitting the enemies were far more prepared than she'd imagined. Rose grins wildly, showering Hermes with praise for sensing the magic from afar. She raved that he was incredible, and proclaimed she'd never seen anyone more talented than herself. Hermes froze, barely able to answer as Rose stepped in, introduced herself and declared he'd caught her attention. He was Hermes von Frenbrid, the boy who hit rock bottom at 7, and in that heartbeat, he was handed a chance to change his life. Rose strides in, declares she's a witch, zeroes in on Hermes with eyes burning at his raw potential, and that meeting sparks the chain of events that will reshape the boy's life. Hermes' voice cracks as he thanks her for saving him. Rose exhales, relieved. She'd only struck those guys in a flash of anger. Then her gaze lands on something strange. They wrote Hermes off as weak, but he locked onto the attack from across the horizon, his hidden talent blazing into view. Tears erupt from Hermes as his father's every word crashes back into his mind. He bursts out that he wanted to be a mage like Rose, then crumples, choking out that he has no magic. Rose recoils, fearing he's hurt, until she sees this is a far deeper pain. Hermes erupts, bitterly declaring that no matter how hard he tries, he'll never be recognized. And Rose, feeling that pain, calmly steps forward and says she hears his story. He confesses his family abandoned him, and his only friend was ripped from his life. Rose stands silent, each breath taking in the raw loneliness he's carried. Rose crushes Hermes into a tight embrace and tells him she knows exactly how much it rips at him. She tears into the arrogant nobles who act superior while feeding off others' power, declares with grave certainty that nothing ever changes in this world, then softens and tells Hermes that lacking ancestral magic doesn't matter, and he mustn't trust what others say. Hermes admits he has no family magic, and Rose reels, her jaw dropping in stunned disbelief. She practically explodes with praise, shouting that his power to wield and sense magic is incredible, calling him an uncut diamond, and vowing she won't let that talent go to waste. Rose gushes over Hermes, calling him cute and cheerfully saying she wants to take him home, and Hermes goes beet red, collapsing into shy, flustered embarrassment. She freezes, chest tight. She'd gone too far. She snaps herself back, locks eyes with him, and says his name with calm, iron resolve. Rose leans in, eyes blazing, and snaps at Hermes. "Do you really like magic?" He snaps a decisive yes. Then his voice falters as he admits that without inherited magic in his blood, he can't become the mage he's always dreamed of. Yet a sincere smile lights his face as he declares he loves magic. Rose yanks Hermes close and snaps that it's time to set the record straight. Hereditary magic is a raw, overwhelming power you inherit. You can't forge it through effort alone. Mid-flight, Rose snaps that this isn't the whole story. Family magic is a mere talent, not a guarantee of real power. She scorches those content to coast on the gift, saying too many inherit it without ever earning it. And Hermes listens, stunned. Rose declares magic isn't a divine miracle but built from human logic. Bloodline magic is powerful, yet she says anyone who devotes themselves can forge their own. And the revelation flips Hermes' world upside down. Slicing through moonlight, Rose confesses she was born with inherited magic shackled to a single form. A burden that feels like a curse. Rose drops the bomb on Hermes. He has no hereditary magic. He wasn't cursed. He commands every kind of magic overflowing with boundless potential. Rose admits Hermes, the world's freest mage, can conjure magic even more astounding than her own. She declares she spent years searching for someone like him, and Hermes feels belief ignite in his chest. Beneath the full moon's glare, Rose thrust her hand toward Hermes, and voice like steel, asked him to become her apprentice, igniting a whole new life for the boy. Hermes admitted his head screamed that Rose's offer reeked of a trap, but when she spoke about magic with burning passion, he found himself believing she loved it as fiercely as he did. Rose's words slam into Hermes. Nothing convinces him more than the fierce, burning certainty that she truly believes in his potential. He snatches the invitation, beams, and declares he's thrilled to work with her. 5 years after Hermes met Rose, time has hardened him. He now sprints through the city streets, every stride bristling with iron resolve. From that day on, she threw herself into relentless study and tackled every noblewoman's duty with fierce determination. Guilt clawed at her like a hungry beast, so she tried to atone by throwing herself into relentless work and iron discipline, that terrible day forever etched behind her eyes. He shuts down every argument, dripping with arrogance as he proclaims hereditary magic decides everything. His overwhelming power lets him name himself the law. Someone worried about the nation's future pleads with him. He brushes them off, sneers that their weak magic is to blame, and coldly snaps the conversation shut. Katya bursts upon a squad of soldiers, led by a man named Chris. He snaps her title, Lady Katya von Trachea, then orders her to cease resistance. Katya's surprise flashes, but she clamps her face into a tight, restrained mask. Chris slams Katya with an accusation of conspiracy against the state, and Katya snaps back, "There's no evidence," and accuses him of abusing his power to imprison the Duke's daughter without official charges, demanding answers and warning she won't be pushed around. Chris blasts out that no official charges have been filed against Katie. He blurts that he's acting on Second Prince Aster's orders and declares every verdict of the prince, yes, even the one that declares her guilty, to be just. But Katya sees right through the bluff. Katya knows that walking into prison now would be her own confession. She suspects Chris is bluffing. But in the gilded world of nobility, a whispered bluff can harden into fact. And 5 brutal years have hammered into her that appearance overrides truth. Katya steels herself, summoning crackling magic to confront Chris, while he sneers at her defiance and taunts that criminals usually try to run. He snarled he'd pull his father's strings to throw her behind bars, but she stood like iron and ordered him to retreat. Katya exploded, ripping into Chris, berating him for his rudeness and lambasting his father's arrogance. Resolute and unbowed, she declares that even amid destruction she still prays for peace, and when she channels her magic, she vows to save a world she cannot even see, though dawn hasn't yet broken. Katya ignites Soteria Trivia, her powerful ancestral magic, as a roaring vortex of raw arcane energy coils around her. The enemy staggers back as her ancestral magic flares. He never expected she'd have it. The opponent strikes back, unleashing his ancestral magic. Misteltina. They unleashed a devastating energy wave that detonated across the field, tearing everything around into rubble. The enemy's attack slammed harder than Rose expected. She lunged to counter, but her magic sputtered and misfired. Wounded and weary, she forced herself back into the fight and faced the threat with iron resolve despite the risk. The enemy sneers at Rose's strike, barely phased, conjures his final spell, boasts the king gave him leave to destroy her, then coldly unleashes it, declaring it's time for her to sleep as Rose collapses, spent but clinging to consciousness. Sprawled on the ground, drained of strength, Rose clings to a memory of Hermes as a child, his eyes full of sincere wonder as he praised her magic, praise no one else had ever given her. His voice steadied her like a lifeline every time. Regret claws at her for not being able to protect him back then. Memories of their childhood, when discrimination closed in around them, ignite something fierce inside her. Rose dismisses mourning the past as useless. Nothing can be changed now. But when defeat hits, she craves one thing and one thing only. Hermes. The boy who once gripped her hand, hoping to save her. Hermes explodes into view at the last heartbeat, slamming a shimmering magical barrier around Rose that shatters the incoming strike, his eyes burning with the determination of a man finally repaying everything she'd done for him. Hermes popped up at Rose's side as tension crackled in the air, flashed a calm smile, said he didn't quite get what was happening, but his eyes made clear she was in trouble. Rose startles at the voice, whirls around and instantly recognizes Hermes, now calm, confident, and grown, who bows and reverently says, "Kari-sama," proof he's come back after years away. Katya's eyes lock on Hermes, and shock and confusion hit her like cold water as childhood scenes flood back. Sunlit afternoons under the tree, their shy smiles, the way he always steadied her. And moved by those memories and his presence, she breathes his name. Hermes strode up to Katya with a cocky grin, introduced himself, and proclaimed that, just as he'd vowed, he'd become an incredible mage and come back to her. An iron calm gaze pins the world. He's finally kept the vow he swore as a child. He storms back into the royal capital, the very place that once expelled him, and the moment he returns, the important figures from his past close in, Katya and his brother standing before him. He addresses them with unnerving calm and declares it's been ages since they last saw one another. The scene snaps back to when she met her mentor. Hostile memories hammering her mind. Kill orders pressing in from every side and contempt like acid in her veins. That meeting shattered her old life and forged a new one. The boy jolts awake, still dazed and confused, and with shaking hands rips the curtains open. He swept his gaze across the unfamiliar room, scrambling to figure out where he was. Stunned by the elegant decor, he dropped onto the bed, still unable to recognize the place. Hermes froze, breath snagged, when a woman nearby smiled serenely and coolly said, "Good morning," to him. Suddenly the memory of last night slams into him. Shame sears his face and his mind reels in mortifying confusion. Hermes scrambles to unravel why he woke up in the same bed with this woman. She says he was running on fumes and conked out on the way. So she brought him to her place, refused to rouse him, and let him sleep right beside her. Then he remembers he's now her student. Hermes' face flamed crimson as he blurted a shaky, "Thank you," and a fumbling apology when he realized she'd changed his clothes and washed him. She flashed a grateful grin, insisted she was the one who should be thanking him, then confessed she lacked human warmth, and that his sleeping nearby made her feel close. She grins, offering Hermes the choice to laze in bed a little longer or keep sleeping at her side. He blushes and shyly refuses, so she reaches out with her hand and says she'll show him the house before breakfast. Hermes falters for a heartbeat, then agrees. They step out of the room together, and that single step ignites the first chapter of their life together. She swept him through the house, saying Hermes can roam everywhere but the lab, and snapping a strict warning, no reckless moves until he's settled in. Hermes watches in stunned silence as the world unfurls like a dream, calm, welcoming. Nothing like the harsh life he once knew. Hermes reels, wondering if he deserves all this as the woman snaps that since he'll be living here he must have his own room. He freezes in surprise and falters, but she flashes a winning smile, insists she lives alone with plenty of space, then offers him the room and tells him to use it freely. Hermes gapes as the room they gave him turns out to be a jam-packed, dust-caked storage grave, and the woman, baffled, admits she hasn't cleaned it in about 10 years. Ernie deflects with a humble grin, saying he's already grateful for the place. She flushes, steers the conversation away, and offers breakfast. Hermes spots a charred dish and blurts, "What happened?" The irritated woman snaps that she hasn't cooked in 10 years and lives on ready-made meals, and Hermes forces a polite smile and says it's fine, because any steaming meal felt like a miracle next to the cold scraps he used to force down. He privately decides she's hopeless at housework despite trying her best, Even faced with that strange meal, Hermes forces a grateful smile, and then, shockingly sincere, begs to be taught magic. Surprise flashes across her face and delight bursts into a radiant smile. She agrees instantly and leads him into the book-lined room where his training will begin. Hermes's breath catches as he stares at a room packed with humming grimoires. The woman swallows and apologizes. She hasn't earned his trust yet. She says she threw herself into caring for him and cooking to wipe that impression clean. But now she feels she's failed at everything. Hermes jolted, realizing she'd really gone out of her way for him, and he admitted what rattled him. A stranger guiding him into unknown territory. That instinct was natural. And she relaxed, relief washing over her at his caution. She clasps his hands with burning sincerity and tells him he's a miracle to her, too precious not to be treasured. She swears on her life. As long as Hermes truly wants to learn magic, she will never betray him. And if he fails, she will not abandon him. Her words struck him like a lifeline. Hermes admits he's been terrified, and when she promises to guide him for as long as he wants to move forward, he begins to open up. Hermes still reels from the day his magic was exposed, and his life plunged into a living nightmare. People spat monster and shut him out, and that wound now tightens into a paralyzing fear of being abandoned all over again. Fighting back tears, he apologizes for doubting her, thanks her with aching honesty, admits he'd already be dead without her, and now hope and magic blaze alive inside him again. Hermes beamed with raw sincerity, pledged himself to her care from that moment, and proudly called her mistress, and her chest tightened at his words. Tears welling, she lunged into a fierce hug and proclaimed him the best student she could have, their jubilation sealing the official beginning of their mentor-student bond. While Hermes trains, his master declares that every spell and lesson drives toward a single, relentless goal. He conquers the most powerful magic she's ever forged, her crowning masterpiece, and she insists only Hermes can wield it to its full, devastating glory. Even if it takes ages, the master plants himself before the great magical circle and declares tense, grueling days await. Hermes' relentless training ignites, and before long time rockets by, hurling them into a brand new chapter of their lives. Hermes squeezed his master's hand, said goodbye in a voice like steel, and vowed he'd return to the royal capital. He vows to honor everything he's learned, reclaim what was lost, and charge forward with no regrets. While his mentor watches in silence, moved to the core by that blazing resolve, Hermes vows he must go to the capital and study every kind of magic until he uncovers his own. Flashing a determined smile, he reveals his true goal. When she finally realizes Hermes is truly leaving, his master plunges into despair, sobbing that she cannot bear the thought of parting. She clutches him, pleading she can't cook, can't clean, can't do anything on her own and can't live without him, while Hermes watches with a faint, knowing smile, already picturing the chaos she'll have to endure without him. Hermes leveled his gaze and told his mentor to stop hugging him. He's 15 now. It's time to move on. She released him with a sad smile and admitted her student must leave. She leans in and whispers that everything she taught him was only a seed. Now it's his choice which magic he'll help bloom in the world. The mistress brands the royal capital a cruel nest of lazy, ill-intentioned people who agree to anything without thinking, and warns Hermes he'll see things he won't want to see. She asks if he still wants to go. She already knows. Hermes has chosen to blaze his own trail, insisting he bears no grudge against life with his master. But pressing business in the capital and a burning drive to climb to its heights mean he can't stay forever. Even if it's a lie, he begs her to trust his choice and not look away. Hermes doubles down on leaving, vowing he'll achieve something spectacular, and, with a grin, jokes he'll only come back if hunger gnaws him, loneliness crushes him, or he's teetering on the brink of death. His mentor flashed a confident smile and urged him warmly to go to the capital, unleash his strength, and prove to everyone who despised him that he has become strong. Smiling with fierce determination, Ernie strides toward a new place, and behind him in the field, his mentor waves her hand, pride and tenderness swelling in her chest as she calls out, "I love you, my student." The master locked his gaze on the sky, voice raw with feeling, and commanded Hermes to restore every last one of his desires. Hermes storms back into the capital and comes face to face with an important person from his past. Armed with fierce strength and hard-won confidence, he finally repays the hand that once saved him, and this instant ignites a reunion, the long-overdue beginning of what should have happened ages ago. Hermes fixes her with a steel-hard stare and swears he'll protect her himself this time. Reborn stronger, he promises to unleash his magic to save her, and that vow sparks the true beginning of his mission. After years apart, Hermes suddenly returns and Katya's breath catches. Recognition explodes across her face. He stepped up, eerily calm, and announced he'd jumped in the moment he spotted her in trouble. Without knowing the whole story, he made it plain he couldn't turn his back. Hermes storms into the circle and throws out his name, while his brother, the one leading the group, fixes him with a venomous glare. Seeing him alive, the brother's memory snapped to Hermes' banishment from the family 5 years ago, and discomfort flared across his face. He sneers rejected, then snaps for the girl at his side to be handed over, every word radiating smug, condescending arrogance. Hermes' brother erupts, snarling that Hermes, only a commoner with no magical blood, has no right to interfere, while Hermes stays ice-cold and demands they explain why they're accusing the girl. She lashes out instantly, swearing she never stained the Duke's honor. His brother snarls that Hermes mustn't interfere, coldly reminding him he's no longer a nobleman. Hermes reminds Katya that her comfort during his imprisonment kept him from breaking, and now he vows to repay her kindness. He leveled a razor-sharp gaze, declared they had many ways to help her, even by removing the nobleman causing trouble, and his brother visibly bristled. Katya's throat tightens at Hermes' words and she snaps, "That's not fair. You appear at this very moment and say things that make me want to rely on you." Hermes smiles. His brother erupted in rage, unleashing devastating magic and snarling that he was arrogant after Hermes suggested getting rid of him. Hermes' brother roars and unleashes a devastating spell, fusing blazing sacred sigils with thunderous ancient titles into one unstoppable technique. Hermes' eyes snap to the spell. Recognition hits him like a punch. He's seen it countless times before. He flashes a confident grin and booms, "I'm glad this is the first spell I see after returning to the capital." Hermes strides forward and unleashes his magic. As he begins the invocation, intricate glowing sigils and a crackling halo of energy spiral into the air, and he bellows a spell invoking truth, creation, and wonder that leaves everyone stunned. Katya watches, admiration burning in her eyes, and realizes he's using something wildly unusual. Hermes bellows that his magic didn't come from noble lineage or divine blessing. He forged it under a master and through relentless self-training, a living testament to power earned by his own sweat. Hermes unleashes his creation magic, Estelle the Primordial, and a towering, radiant lattice of sorcery erupts before him, a blazing monument to the summit of what he forged by his own strength, the raw materialization of achievements earned, not inherited or blessed by gods. Rage tearing through him, Hermes' brother screamed, refusing to believe Hermes could have reached higher magic and ripping into his creation as second-rate magic, while Hermes' firm snapped back with impatient opposition. The noble splutters that his only mission was to capture Katya, then goes silent, stunned to see the brother he once despised shatter every expectation. Amid the clash, the enemy roared that nobody would care about the ordinary person trapped at the heart of the chaos. Hermes, unyielding, hurls his will into the spell and ignites it. Katya watches in silence, respect written on her face as she explains Estelle of the beginning was forged to dissect and replicate any magic, the literal foundation of how magic is born. Katya warns that every spell bows to iron laws and can only be copied by preserving the original pattern. But her gift is shackled by hereditary magic that bars her from rising above that level, while Hermes answers to no such chains. Unshackled from any hereditary magical lineage, he could, in theory, replicate spells no ordinary mage could ever pull off. His opponent stares down the impossible. Hermes stood unnervingly calm, tracing the dizzying complexity of what he'd just pulled off. He'd reproduced lineage magic no one else could copy right before everyone's eyes, made possible by the hard-earned knowledge he'd amassed and relentless training since childhood. And he didn't just prove a theory. He unleashed that copied magic flawlessly in live combat. Crushed by bitter disappointment, Hermes' brother howled in despair, refusing to accept that he'd been eclipsed. To him, Hermes should have stayed forgotten, a man lost to the past. But Hermes, unmoving and mute, coils a storm of magic in his palms, determined to reply with crushing power, not words. Hermes unleashes his magic with unstoppable force. A jagged bolt of energy slams into Chris's head, sending him flying. The surrounding knights scream his name in shock, unable to stop his fall. Chris crumples. His allies erupt in panic, sprinting to his side as Hermes and Katya seize the chaos and slip away. Rage and humiliation consumed Chris. He screamed uncontrollably, ordering his soldiers to annihilate the troops as the pursuit ripped through the city. Hermes and Katya bolted free and slipped into a distant alley, safe at last. And as he doubled over, gasping from the run, he stared, stunned at how much he'd matured in 5 years. Katya, trembling with fury, unleashed a rapid-fire barrage of questions and accusations, exposing just how desperately he had hunted for him all this time. Katya drops to her knees before Hermes, demanding to know why he didn't trust her all this time. pouring out the raw pain and terror of nearly losing him, and admitting she regrets not being able to help. While Hermes listens in stunned silence, every one of her words pressing down on him. He locks eyes with her and delivers a simple, sincere apology. Katya, overwhelmed, dissolves into tears in his arms. Tears streak Katya's face as she thanks Hermes for surviving, forgives him, and a relieved smile breaks free when she sees him. Hermes leans in, gently presses his forehead to hers and murmurs, he's sorry he couldn't do anything sooner. And wordless they shoulder the heavy memories and the strange relief of reunion. Katya leans in and unleashes a rapid-fire barrage of questions about Hermes' life over the past 5 years. She's hell-bent on finding where he lives, exposing how he lives, and nailing down what he plans to do next. Hermes tries to speak, but his words stumble and come out scrambled, leaving her stunned. Then, with a shy grin, he admits he's got a few ideas but hasn't decided on any yet. Katya's face lights up as she swings her door wide, inviting Hermes to move in and declaring she'll personally escort him to work. The sudden offer hits Hermes like a lightning strike. He freezes, eyes wide, unable to summon a single reply. The subordinate collapses to his knees, begging pardon for failing to catch Katya, while the prince's voice cuts cold. He reminds him he had ample troops and still let some unknown mage defeat him. Shame burned in him after the defeat, so the prince doctored his report to hide that an exile had beaten him. He brands Katya a rising threat to the nation, unleashes an investigation on the mage who aided her, and slaps a strict ban on her movements. Ice filled the prince's eyes as he stared down the humiliated subordinate. Contempt burning. He treats anyone who forgets their place as prey to be crushed like so many before. And with merciless calm he casts him off as nothing but a nuisance. Storming out of his teacher's house, the boy raced back to the capital, found Katya, his childhood friend, falsely accused, and unleashed ancestral Aster magic to snatch her from disaster. Surprised by her bold proposal, he swallowed the shock and followed her to the Tarcox family estate. Then the main character swept into the palace at Katya's side. Even though he'd been here before, the place still swallowed him with its massive scale. And when a servant spotted her, he sprinted over, relief crashing through him at her return, and worry gnawing at how long she'd been gone. Panic clawed at Layla when she spotted Katya, wounded and caked in grime. Katya hushes her with a steady hand, then Layla locks onto Hermes, the boy Katya played with as a kid, and blurts that he's notorious for being expelled for lack of talent. Relief explodes through her the moment she sees him safe and healthy. Katya throws open the gates of the Trohia estate, and wraps Hermes in a warm welcome, swearing her servants will never look down on him like the Fenriel houses did. Relief cracks a grin across Hermes' face as they're escorted before Lord Jorgen, and Katya strides forward to introduce him. Lord Jorgen grips Hermes' arm, thanks him for protecting Katya, and stares in stunned awe at how much Hermes has grown. Learning Katya wants to hire him as a guard, he urges Hermes to unleash his magic again. His daughter had been dazzled before, so Hermes nods and braces to put on the demonstration. Hermes unleashes a dazzling spell that stuns Lord Jorgen. Jorgen admits he's never seen anything like it, and when pressed about the technique's origin, Hermes dodges the truth and claims he was taught by a certain person. Hidden in the shadows, Hermes' master senses a looming revelation and begs him to stop talking about her. Hermes clamps his lips shut, refusing to spill a single detail and guarding his mentor's identity. Even when Duke Trohia, head of a noble family, bore down on him in person, Hermes clenched his jaw and refused to spill a single word about his master. Hermes declares this choice isn't born of fear or the leader's pressure, but of raw devotion and respect. He swears he won't betray the teachings or trust of the one who taught him, and plants himself unshakably to defend his mentor. The Duke leans in, desperate to decode Hermes' magic, and doubting he could ever reproduce the ancestral magic. Hermes snaps that it's not a copy at all, but a complete reproduction, forged from careful observation and strict theory. When they grilled him relentlessly about possible restrictions, like how many times it could be used or whether spells could be swapped, Hermes roars there's no limit. He can unleash reproduced magic again and again at will, and every previous save stays unlimited. Shock jolts the Duke. Hermes' power can mimic any spell with no limits and be used forever, and he knows it could tear down the very foundations of noble society. He corners Hermes, demanding his goals and why, now so powerful, he's returned to the royal capital, then lashes out with doubt over why Hermes saved Katya and declares he won't accept him until those motives are revealed. The Duke's suspicion snaps. He doubts Hermes' intentions, and suspects he'll once more worm his way into the nobility with a hidden agenda. Hermes locks eyes, admits stirring distrust comes naturally. Then, without a beat, declares his true aim isn't to cause sorrow or to manipulate anyone. He's hunting for a magic he can call his own. Hermes fiercely defies the Duke and lays bare his true ambition. He spurns prestige and any truce with the nobility. He hungers to forge his own magic, born of sweat and study, not bloodline. And Hermes says his true dream has always been to pierce the heart of how magic is made, so he can one day unleash a power that's only his. His master's spark ignited him. He swore to forge something more beautiful than hereditary magic, a living testament to his existence and craft. Hermes admits he stepped in for Katya. Even cornered and outmatched, she kept putting others before herself. When he saw she was still that same kind girl who'd supported him before, a fierce determination flared in him. He swore he'd repay her kindness. Duke scoffs that Hermes' mind looked naive at first glance, but he grudgingly admits that as a father, relief and a fierce pride surged through him when he saw someone trust his daughter so completely. Finally he blurts it out, relief roaring in his chest. Hermes will protect Katya. A hot blush exploded across Katya's face at her father's remark, and she bolted to blurt that Hermes doesn't think of her that way. A fierce joy burns in her soul. Hermes will forever stand at her side as guardian. But she buries that thrill beneath a calm mask. Relief surged through Hermes when he saw everything had turned out way better than he'd expected. He thanked Katya for the warm welcome. He'd been ready to sleep under the open sky, but she ushered him into a cozy room. After weighing everything, a cold certainty hits him. Lord Jurgen must publicly denounce his brother's role in the incident. The order came from Prince Aster, and for now the enemies can be held at bay. A bolt of resolve drives into Hermes. He must stand as Katya's guardian against whatever lurking danger might strike. And Katya steps out onto the balcony. She slams a call through, breathless. So much has happened. We never had time to talk properly. Hermes can't stop praising Katya, confessing he'd always wondered how she became so breathtaking. And Katya freezes, cheeks flaming with surprised embarrassment. They grumble he's gotten blunt. Hermes blinks, baffled by the fuss. And Katya flashes back to the shy compliments he once whispered to her. Hermes kept his distance and used stiff, formal speech to match their new status. But Katya snapped for the old address. He's her servant and must obey his mistress. Hermes nods, cheeks burning, and blurts Katya, making her flush while a delighted smile blooms across her face. That night Katya pressed Hermes about his master. Hermes flinched, said he couldn't say much because of the man's social standing, then hissed that the master had been branded a failure. Hermes explodes with confidence, declaring his magic master the most amazing in the world and swearing his master will forever remain #1 to him. Hermes asks how her last 5 years went, and Katya snaps that everything shifted when she got engaged to Prince Aster. Hermes jolts, finally convinced it's true, and Katya warns that if she really had a fiancé, even him, her childhood friend and servant, couldn't be here with her this late. Katya drops the bomb that her engagement to Prince Aster was broken off last month, says she's merely the daughter of a rejected nobleman. And she smiles, calm and unshaken. Hermes throws on his formal clothes, and Layla beams, gushing that he looks incredible, and that Katya will love it. Hermes bolts down the stairs into a ghostly, sparsely staffed mansion, servants almost nowhere to be seen, especially around Katya. And Layla drags him aside for a private word on his very first day as a guard. Hermes leans in, asking if Katya has any real friends in the capital, and Layla snaps that she doesn't. Katya can't let anyone in because, as a duke's daughter, everyone who comes near brings a selfish agenda. Layla pivots to Hermes and implores him to be Katya's emotional anchor, someone who understands her feelings and never leaves her. Hermes realized, after 5 years away from the capital, that Katya, the duke's daughter, had endured brutal hardship, even the shattering of her engagement, so he vowed to stand by her. But just as he turned to leave, her frantic call cracked the air and froze him. Hermes strides in, dressed to the nines, and apologizes for being late. Katya freezes, cheeks burning with shock, hides her face and pleads with him to stay back for a while. The other girls swarm to soothe her, insisting she's just dazzled, and Hermes, cheeks burning with embarrassment, wonders if he really looked that good in that outfit. Decked in his new uniform, Hermes strides up to Katya, introduces himself, and swears with fierce sincerity he'll gladly take care of her. Her childhood friend and assistant, he promises to stand by her side and is ready to support her now. Katya is slammed by the memory of her mother leaving when she was just a child, and in desperate panic she bolts after her, begging her not to go. In her memories the mother beams with gentle warmth, and just before slipping away she clasps Katya's hand and begs her never to forget. Before leaving, Katya's mother leans close and declares with fierce calm, "Never use magic to dominate, wield it to shield the weak. And if you want true happiness, protect the joy of others. Katya sprints after her, heart tearing, and catches her final plea. Make me noble, make me worthy of respect. Katya's face crumples in despair as a destructive attack tears the city apart. She screams for her mother, frozen by roaring flames and collapsing ruins, fear flooding her, tears streaming as she reaches out and begs this not to happen, overwhelmed by helplessness and pain before the tragedy. Katya wakes silent and pensive, the past's memories still clinging to her like ghosts. She stares at a family photo and murmurs, "Good morning, Mom," longing and tenderness swelling in her chest. In a few days, Hermes officially becomes her guardian, kicking off a new chapter with him by her side. During the meeting, a soldier burst in and announced a dungeon had been found in the Hawaii mountains, on the edge of another count's territory. Monsters swarmed the village, but no one died. Threat looming, the Duke orders civilians evacuated and prepares to tackle it, but his soldiers are tied up. Katya pushes forward, fierce and decisive, and announces she'll go herself to handle the danger. Katya snarls she'll go to the attack site, insisting that as a noblewoman wielding ancestral magic, she is duty-bound to protect the people. The Duke wavered, then, struck by her burning dedication, gave his blessing and reminded her she'd always fought for others, and promised her mother she'd become noble and worthy of respect. Hermes vows once more to stand sentinel over Katya, and the Duke, trusting him, commands him to take soldiers and race back at once if danger rears its head. Hermes' mind snaps to Katya's mother, pure kindness and unshakable bravery. When they were 6, one of them gave their life standing between the city and a ravenous horde of monsters. Katya still clutches that memory like a sacred relic. Marching with the soldiers, Katya locks eyes with Hermes and fires. "Ever fought monsters?" He shoots back, "Yes, during training." Katya slams the truth. Monsters are exploding in number, breeding like wildfire, and if we don't stop them, they'll grow dangerous enough to threaten all of humanity. Right now, they're the nation's gravest danger. Katya warns that strange, maze-like structures called dungeons spawn monster lairs, and as hordes swell inside, they harden into fortified bases that can unleash a catastrophe on the kingdom. One of the knights explodes in protest when Katya hires Hermes, roaring that he's only a boy and must not be burdened with such a deadly task. He bellowed about the dungeon's deadly risks and the crushing burden it would saddle them with, and Katya firm snapped that she chose Hermes for his skill. Pure merit, not personal ties. Count Eldridge swaggered up to Katya and Hermes, arrogance burning in his eyes. Someone taunts her as an imperfect young lady, and the room snaps taut when the Count strides in, sneering with cold contempt and demanding why she's here. Hermes' ears prick at the name. He remembers his land's border Katya's. Count Eldridge throws his weight around, roaring he'll seize the dungeon at once, and snapping for Katya to leave. He teases her again, crowing she should be touched that he's shouldering her burden. Katya snaps that this land answers to her duchy, and Hermes watches in silence, irritation simmering at the Count's arrogance. Count Eldridge snaps, unleashing a venomous torrent of insults at Katya. He snarled that she was angling to steal the dungeon's credit, branded her useless, spat that the prince rejected her and she lacked any magic. Hermes' cheeks flamed as Katya listened, her face tightened with worried seriousness. Eldridge cranks the tension and proclaims himself God's chosen. A hulking monster erupts from the shadows and lunges at him without warning. Hermes sprang forward without a second thought and annihilated the creature in an instant, right before everyone's eyes. Calm as stone, he tosses out a sarcastic "sorry" and insists he only acted because he thought Eldridge was in danger. Hermes, cool and civil, taunts Eldridge, lays out the ruin they'd have faced if they'd ignored the surprise attack, and publicly shreds his arrogance and ineptitude, proving he never even saw the monster slither in. Rage detonates in the Count. He erupts, humiliated by a man he'd always dismissed as a mere servant. With a cocky smirk, Hermes quips he only wanted to help, just a boy with no training. Then goads Eldridge, daring the Count to cry with gratitude. Seething with humiliation, Eldridge snarled a promise of revenge, bellowed at the soldiers, and swore he'd never forget Hermes' face. Around them, onlookers gaped, jaws dropping at how Hermes had handled the situation. Hermes throws up his hands and blurts an apology. He admits he let himself get carried away. The guard, voice cracking, admits he was wrong about him, ashamed he judged him by his looks, and hails his courage. He even faced the Count to shield his master, while Katya watches the reconciliation and exhales in relief. Galvanized, the other soldiers surged onward, driving the mission forward with fierce, unbreakable unity. Hermes fired razor-precise spells, obliterating several monsters in a heartbeat. He commands the scene. Katya, eyes glued to his every move, beams, praises his efficiency, and now trusts him completely as her guard. Hermes flashes a grin and reveals he channels everyday magic supercharged by Istel origin effects, letting him launch spells without a single spoken word. It's not as mighty as hereditary magic, but its speed and raw effectiveness leave everyone stunned. The soldiers roared about the dungeon victories, hailing Hermes for the win, and Katya and the guards strode on with confidence, until a sudden movement snapped their heads around. The group stumbles upon a towering, snarling behemoth, radiating a raw, crackling magical aura. Hermes' senses flare. This raw surge of power means only one thing: the dungeon boss, and the room snaps tight as everyone straightens, weapons raised for the decisive battle. Hermes' voice cracks as he yells, "That's a dragon turtle, the black turtle. Don't be fooled by the shell, it's a full-fledged dragon, the exact kind I battled during training." Fear burning for Count Eldridge's fate, Hermes urges a temporary retreat to regroup, gather strength, and plan their next steps with the Minister of Justice at her side. The dragon turtle's roar explodes across the battlefield, obliterating any chance to retreat. Hermes and Katya are slammed by its fury and snap to high alert as danger closes in. The dragon turtle slams its massive shell into the ground, the impact sending the entire structure into a violent shudder. Hermes launches himself over Katya to shield her as the ground beneath them shatters. Soldiers scramble to retreat, but the destruction races outward and the situation snaps into catastrophe. A split-second protective barrier rockets into place around them, shielding the group and saving their lives. Hermes breathes. Katya's alive, then grits out that the escape route is shattered. They're cut off and must face the dungeon boss with no way to retreat. The dragon turtle bellows and shatters the group's barrier, flinging debris everywhere as Hermes plants himself before Katya and the soldiers, every sinew primed to meet the beast face to face. The chapter cuts off on electric tension, marking the start of the decisive battle. The dragon turtle bolts like a cannon shot, shockingly quick for a beast that massive. The creature hurls a gargantuan paw at the knights, blasting one soldier backward. The captain barely blocks it, but the impact rattles through him, and he knows this fight will be far harder than he expected. Hermes locks his aim and rains a volley of pinpoint magic onto the dragon turtle, explosions blooming over its carapace as deep cracks spiderweb across the shell. Ordinary attacks fall flat. Hermes urgently asks Katya to unleash ancestral magic. She wastes no time. When the dragon recoils, Katya thrusts her hand up and unleashes Sotria Trivia, ancient magic erupting as crackling energy coils around her, a blazing warning that they will finally strike with full force. The dragon turtle blasted forward, pivoting in a heartbeat to slip past Katya's attack. She reels at the creature's lightning moves, and before she can act again, Hermes is at her side, thrusting his hand out with iron resolve and declaring he'll help, ready to move as one with her. Hermes locked his gaze, braided his magic with surgical precision, and unleashed the spell, Blood Chain. They lashed the turtle dragon with enchanted chains before it could strike them, hauling it into the air where it hung powerless. And Katya's eyes went wide as she felt the raw strength and perfect coordination between them in battle. Shackled in Hermes' chains, the turtle dragon explodes in a savage surge of raw power, ripping part of its bonds apart. Soldiers gape in stunned silence as Katya and Hermes reel at its remaining strength, and Katya snaps, irritated, finally realizing they'd underestimated the enemy. Hermes watched the dragon snap a shimmering barrier into place, shrugging off the previous attack like it was nothing. A raw, ancestral aura slammed into him, dragging up a terrifying memory from his past. He finally understood the enemy was far stronger than they'd imagined. Hermes' memory snaps back a year to a brutal battle with a fierce dragon. Danger loomed. Its destructive attacks wrecked everything, and every heartbeat was a desperate fight for his life. That enemy's magic crackles exactly like that battle, and it slams Hermes with the same knife-edge anxiety and razor vigilance. He remembers that, like the red dragon he fought beside the master, this foe laughs off ordinary spells, and his dungeon explorations proved only other methods can fell such creatures. So he snaps into action, forging a decisive plan because victory will demand more than magic alone. The knights hurled themselves into the fray, shields raised as they fought to keep Katya safe. One of them bellows for her to bolt with Hermes and cry out for help. Katya plants her feet and roars a refusal at the idea of retreat, refusing to abandon her comrades on the battlefield. Threats can't shake her. She swears she won't leave them, determination and an iron sense of duty blazing in her veins. Katya freezes, panic clawing at her throat as the thought of abandoning her comrades hits her. She feels every inch of their sacrifice, but the terror of losing them pins her to the spot. Drowning in pain and confusion, she freezes. Then her mother's memory flares to life, and with a single steady voice and living example it steels her to make the right choice. Hermes scoops Katya into his arms and yells her name, desperation ripping through his voice. He yells that only one attack can shatter the dragon's barrier, but it must be charged and cast, with the threat closing in around them. They both know unleashing it will decide the battle. Hermes' face hardens and he snaps, "Pin the dragon dead still for 5 seconds. I'll land the decisive blow, and those seconds will decide the battle." Hermes rockets into a sprint, pulling crackling mana into his palm as he carves a blazing magic circle into the air. The dragon's eyes lock onto the movement and it explodes forward, fangs bared and claws raking in a brutal strike. Hermes darts aside like lightning, eyes locked as he forges the decisive spell. Hermes explodes into motion, slipping past the dragon's attacks and fortifying his body with crackling magic. The knights roar he's not inferior to a professional warrior. His blend of agility and sorcery dominates the battlefield. As the dragon lunges at Hermes mid-assault, one of the knights, he lunges into the path, slams the blade aside and roars, "I will not allow this!" The knight takes the hit, letting Hermes dart forward unharmed while the team hammers the dragon down to its knees. Katya pounces on the opening, calm and deadly, and lines up her final strike as the beast roars in pain. Katya flings her last sparks of magic to pin the dragon back, feels her power almost spent, yet she refuses to surrender. She clamps her magic into a tight, breathless hold, stealing the seconds the final attack needs. Hermes erupts in praise, hailing Katya for buying them enough time. His last magic roars to full charge as he hurls a colossal fire spell, set to blast through the dragon's defenses with a devastating strike. Hermes is unleashing the final decisive surge of his magic, replicating the destructive technique, alternative dragon breath. They blasted a sea of fire at the enemy dragon, swallowing it whole and striking with the raw force of a real dragon's breath. Hermes' strike rips into the dragon, which howls as searing flames lap at its scales. A sudden titanic blast tears through its magical defenses, and the creature's body begins to be devoured by relentless fire. The replicated spell slams into him, and he crumples under its devastating force. They swarm the dragon's fallen bulk, breaths held as it lies downed but razor alert, eyes tracking every movement. Hermes analyzes in silence as a knight explodes into premature triumph, certain they've won, and Katya gasps. Hermes' magic flickers unlike anything she's ever seen, seizing her full attention. Hermes boasts he copied a dragon's magic from a beast in another dungeon and unleashed it. Using Islay of the Origin, he rips off any spell, even a monster's fiercest magic, and makes hereditary magic look weak. Katya, stunned and moved by Hermes' mastery, gushes that he's become an incredible mage, and when he asks if she's hurt, she says no, locking away what she truly feels. Katya's voice cracks and tears burn in her eyes as she declares she feels utterly useless. Even wielding her hereditary magic, hailed as one of the realm's strongest and powerful enough to fell dragons, she couldn't help when everyone counted on her. She storms, comparing herself to Hermes and seething as everyone writes her off as a flawed young girl who can't use magic. Guilt gnaws at Katya. She couldn't unleash her full power when it mattered, and is convinced her weakness put everyone in danger. Expecting Hermes to be disappointed, she braces, but he simply whispers her name and takes her hand, showing he feels no blame and still respects her. Hermes slams the question at Katya. "Were you ever disappointed in me back when everyone dismissed me as useless and talentless?" The way people treated him left marks he still feels, but he insists he's not disappointed in her. He repeats her exact answer back to her, a deliberate echo that proves he trusts her. Katya's breath catches, warmth blooming in her chest. She'd once dismissed him as hopeless, sure he'd never become a great mage, and now awe slams into her. She was completely wrong. Hermes proclaims that anyone who grinds like Katya is bound to become a great mage, spots a block stifling her magic, and challenges her to recast Soteria Trivia with her own power. His confidence roaring as he pushes her to reveal what's caging her magic. The boy leans in, schooling the girl on how to recreate Soteria Trivia, and proves he must plunge into the spell's original heart by wielding the Stele of the Origin. Watching him, the girl zeroed in on the family magic's hidden flaw. Its twists are so deep even those born to it miss the smallest seams. He snaps that hereditary mages wield magic like breathing, never knowing its inner gears, so they miss hidden glitches. Staring at the girl, he suspects her misfires come from that blind spot, and vows he'll personally uncover the reason for her struggle. Count Eldridge storms into the clearing where the two youngsters stand, spots the fallen dungeon boss, and knows the toughest fight's already over. His job just got a whole lot easier. Shrugging off the crowd like dust, the Count storms up the stairs flanked by his soldiers. A shocked girl lunges to stop him, but he brushes off her protests and presses on. Count Eldridge snatches the famed artifact from the dungeon and bursts into triumphant laughter, already picturing treasure, sprawling estates, and even a title promotion if he hands it to the royal family. Rage crackling, she lashes out at Count Eldridge, accusing him of scheming to steal the glory of clearing the dungeon and slaying its boss. The Count explodes, roaring that the victory was rightfully his and accusing her group of stealing his merits, while the two young people look on, disappointed and eyeing his intentions with mounting suspicion. She brandished the dragon's corpse as undeniable proof of who truly defeated the dungeon boss, and demanded Count Eldridge stop twisting the situation. The Count grins like a predator and vows to obliterate every trace, even the monster's corpse, since they're alone in the mountains with no witnesses. Count Eldridge invokes Iolos, the ancestral magic. A blazing rune circle erupts behind him as he commands the southern, northern, and divine winds into a roaring maelstrom, poised to hurl a cataclysmic spell. The Count sneers and unleashes his ancestral magic, daring anyone to challenge his supremacy. He goaded her, sneering that her flaws chained her. She'd never break his spells. He thundered that in that country only magical power matters, and sneered at anyone he called weak. The girl and the boy steel themselves, bracing for the threat barreling toward them. The Count summons Katya with a cold sneer, taunting that only stronger magic would force him to acknowledge her arguments and retreat. Katya's anger flares, but she admits his sorcery is mighty and steels herself to beat it, and a boy steps forward with a bold plan. The boy snaps that magic feeds on emotion, and he suspects Katya's struggles come from her feelings knotting up or being shot the wrong way whenever she channels a spell. He hammers home that only raw, honest feeling can charge the spell with real emotional power. He warned that most people can't read their own hearts, and that confusion strangles their magic. Katya peels back the truth. She first convinced herself she used magic to end the Count's bullying, or to strike back at his provocation. But those are just excuses. The real, private fire driving her is a fierce desire to act justly and nobly. Katya's chest tightens. She'd been strangling her own feelings to bow to duty and wear the flawless mask of a noblewoman. And when the weight of everyone else's expectations crashes in, she sees she was only giving them what they wanted. At that instant, when reality slammed into her, a lightning-clear truth tore through her. She finally recognizes the feeling pounding in her heart. Heart blazing with raw feeling, Katya unleashes a torrent of magic that tears the air apart. Fury snaps through her as the Count reaches to steal credit for a deed he never even touched, brazenly erasing the blood, sweat, and danger she and the others bore. Indignation hardens into a vow for justice. She will never again tolerate his contempt. Katya erupts as her ancestral magic roars to life. The Count reels at the raw power, and Eldridge goes pale, realizing this spell is unlike anything he's ever heard. Katya plants her feet, voice like iron, and tells him straight that he should be ashamed of his actions. Katya bellows, "Soteria trivia," conjuring armed skeleton warriors that surge on the Count. Eldridge, gripped by fear, panics and retreats, unable to respond to the true power she has awakened. The Count erupts in self-justification, branding Katya's magic a cheap illusion, snarling it will shred her reputation to pieces, and steps forward to intimidate them. The boy shoots back with a sneer, reminding them the Count himself said there were no witnesses, then flashes a provocative smile and snarls, "Erase every trace," repeating the Count's exact threat. The boy taunts the Count. If Katya's magic killed him, everyone would think a monster did it, since the arcane trace would point to her. Eldridge spirals into panic, orders the creatures hauled away, and fires off chaotic commands, and the boy stays deadly calm, lifts a hand and signals he now controls the situation. One of Katya's allies storms through the Count's knights, lays them out cold, and says he needed to let loose years of pent-up fury. Panicked, Eldridge collapses to his knees and begs for mercy as the boy, cool and unflinching, hands the decision to the Count. And the Count already knows exactly what he must do to be spared. Cornered, defeated, and with no way out, Count Eldridge surrenders, a grim mask settling over his face as he admits defeat. He thunders that the artifact belongs to the group and affirms their legal right to conquer the dungeon. The boy and the rest lie captured, and the staff hangs before them, now officially in their hands. The Count bolts away, humiliated, as the group explodes into wild, triumphant cheers, finally safe. Katya froze at the raw surge of strength and demanded if the boy had helped. He shook his head, saying the power was hers alone, and a rush of emotion hit her as she realized she'd just unleashed that fierce magic herself for the first time. The boy erupts in praise, telling Katya it was the most breathtaking spell she'd ever cast. Still stunned, she admits that though this magic is inherited from her noble family, something's missing. He grips her gaze and snaps. This isn't the limit of your power. You must feel it. Katya leans in, eyes aflame, daring him. Can you awaken the same power I wield? He flashes a confident grin and declares he believes in it, then confesses a private hunger for her magic. He wants to wield that incredible power himself. Katya, voice trembling, urges him not to hold back. It's the least she can offer after everything he's done for her. A few days later, the Duke's house lay cloaked in a tense, suffocating silence. Katya cradled a steaming cup of black tea and raved about its flavor. The boy grinned and confessed he'd often brewed it for his former master. She praised his skill, and he beamed, delighted to have guessed her taste. Hermes dazzles the manor servants with masterful housekeeping, earning glowing praise as he snaps through every chore like a seasoned professional. His polite offer to do anything she asked hit Katya like a punch. She gaped, choked on her tea, and worried onlookers rushed over to check if she was okay. After the tea debacle, a servant cuts the silence and blurts that Katya's feelings for Hermes are painfully obvious. Katya snaps, denies it, says she can't admit it, lays out the chasm between their stations and how he must see their bond. But the pain stamped on her face gives her away. Chaos churns in Katya's chest. She can't even name her feelings and dreads what Hermes will think of her after the broken engagement. Terrified, she'll look fickle. Servants rush to her side, desperate to calm her with hurried whispers. Katya reels as Hermes morphs from a bright, simple-hearted spark into a quietly mature, distant figure, leaving her stumped about how to reach him. Katya blurts out, cheeks aflame, that she knows it's selfish, but she desperately wants Hermes to be more interested in her. He muttered praise like an afterthought, his voice flat, and her heart sank with disappointment. The servant instantly reads her heart, realizing Katya wants to draw out that same naive, shy Hermes they'd seen before. Softer, more emotional and spontaneous. And Katya, cheeks burning, finally nods. The servant practically vibrates as he exclaims there's a simple way to make Hermes show more feelings. Katya has no choice. She's got to go on a date with him. The direct hint struck Katya like a lightning bolt. She froze, mouth agape, utterly stunned by the idea. The chapter explodes open when the servant brazenly pitches arranging a date between Katya and Hermes. She pitches a stroll through the capital like ordinary youth, ready to savor the moment and showcase every inch of Katya's charm. Already electric, she's mapping out every detail in her head, while Katya pulls the reins on that excitement, insisting nothing happens without her consent. The servant tugs Katya's sleeve, spots the tired, shadowed crescents under her eyes. She hasn't slept since the dungeon conquest, and snaps, "You spent the whole night buried in monster damage reports." Katya's jaw dropped when she realized even her father, Lord Jurgen, had been worrying about her. Elsewhere on the estate, he confesses that after his wife's death, Katya threw herself into embodying every duty of a noble woman. Katya's breath catches when her father admits he regrets that her noble duties stole her freedom, and urges her to be a girl her age and have fun once in a while. His words struck Katya like lightning. She steeled herself, shoved aside fear, and asked Hermes to go out, determined to find out where it would lead. The next day, Katya and Hermes strode side by side through the royal capital, their footsteps echoing down glittering streets. Hermes drinks in the city, nostalgia crashing in as childhood memories surge back. He thanks Katya for the invite, and admits he's wanted to come here forever. His face lighting up with delight while Katya blushes, reacts shyly, and still fumbles with the moment. Before the date, the maid clasps Katya's hands and insists she not worry about the breakup with the prince. There were no feelings between them, and it was the prince who proposed marriage. She urges her to own her feelings and wishes Katya a good day. Those words spark something in Katya, who finally embraces her emotions and steels herself to move forward. Purge the dead weight of useless memories, then summon Hermes's words. Sincere feeling supercharges magic. A soft smile tugs at her lips, and stars ignite in her eyes as she reaches out with steady resolve, finally owning her feelings and ready to confess them without fear. Cheeks flaming but resolve hard as steel, Katya grabs Hermes's hand and strides beside him. Startled, he demanded why, and she, scrambling to hide the tell, insisted the capital was too crowded and they'd get lost. She flushed and acted casual, but the very gesture she tried to hide bared her true feelings. Katya, still gripping Hermes's hand, bolts through the capital, excitement crackling as she pulls him along. She whisks him through the city's highlights, the bustling market and the quiet residential streets, unspooling each scene with simple, natural explanations, while Hermes walks at her shoulder, wide-eyed and stunned by her contagious enthusiasm and the new, electric rhythm between them. Nostalgia claws at Hermes as he walks beside Katya. I remember how she'd yank him away from his spellbooks and drag him out for walks whenever he sank too deep into his magic studies. The memory tugs a grin from him, But the moment acquaintances cut across their path, he and Katya go crimson, clamp their joined hands and shove them out of sight as they hurry past. Merchants who catch sight of her surge up to Katya and Hermes, hollering their thanks for everyone to hear. Right before their trip to the capital, Katya swooped in, exposed a crooked supplier's scam, and pulled the shop back from the brink of bankruptcy. Hermes' jaw drops as he realizes Katya quietly helps people without bragging. Katya shrugs, insisting she's merely fulfilling her duty as a noblewoman, and the merchant scoffs that few nobles would lift a finger for a common shop like theirs. Moments later, her eyes zero in on their joined hands and she snaps, "Are you two sneaking off on a secret date?" Panic seizes Katya as she scrambles to cover everything, insisting she's only showing the city to her new assistant, while the merchant watches the spectacle and lets out a quiet, knowing laugh. The shopkeeper sweeps Katya and Hermes into her glittering jewelry parlor for nobles. Katya's stomach knots with unease, but she forces a shaky yes. Hermes confesses he's clueless about jewelry. Katya is stunned. She thought every noble loved gems, and she fires back that she lives for fashion and dressing to the nines. Katya confesses to Hermes she adores fashion, but never felt the need to dress up for anyone, and she keeps talking about her former fiancé with a sad ache. No matter what she did, he'll never truly behold her. Hermes listens, utterly silent, his chest clenching at the raw sincerity in her voice. Herm admits he's always chased beauty. He fell headlong for magic because it struck him as beautiful, and people grab him the same way. He craved watching someone already gorgeous become even more irresistible. When he admitted he wanted Katya wearing the shop's jewelry, she froze, cheeks flushing at his sincere words, and Germa's remark about her and jewels left Katya painfully embarrassed. The saleswoman reads the room, flashes a cheeky grin, quips that things are heating up, and beams a warm wish for the couple's happiness. Katya, cheeks blazing and voice trembling with desperation, bursts in and shatters the moment, cutting off everything. I yank Herma out of the store, heart racing, and blurt that nothing here is what it seems. Night fell, yet her hurt still burned like a fresh wound. She shrieks, "I can't believe this!" while Katya simmers, irritated, mortified, cheeks burning as she stands alone. She can hardly believe Herm can so calmly blurt awkward things in public, especially when she remembers him saying he wants to see her even more beautiful. So she buries her face in the pillow, cheeks burning. Later, she pulls Layla aside and discovers the palace will throw a grand celebration in her honor for handing the artifact over to the royal family. Katya yanks you into her room, begging for help picking a dress for the party. She's determined to look well-dressed. She stuns Layla by finally fussing over her appearance, something she'd never done before. And Layla, visibly touched, agrees to help. Katie names the shop they'll hit to pick out an accessory. Celebration day had arrived. The hall buzzed with nobles, and Hermes swept his gaze over the crowd, awed by the tide of dignitaries, standing at Katya's side while doubt gnawed at whether he was really fit for the role, even though everyone had pushed him into it. Katya glided into the party in an elegant dress, the entire room snapping to attention. Her beauty silences Hermes, every eye snapping to her, and in that charged heartbeat their connection shifts into something unforgettable. Katya hovers, voice trembling as she shyly asks how she looks in the dress. Hermes freezes, stunned by her beauty and at a loss for words, then takes her hand, and searching for the right thing to say, simply and sincerely tells her she's incredibly beautiful. Shock slammed into Katya, cheeks aflame, words strangled in her throat. At the party, the crowd couldn't stop gushing about Katya, her breathtaking beauty, flawless manners, and a streak of dazzling magical triumphs. Eldridge's name exploded through the crowd, whispers racing that she'd driven him back with ancestral magic, and Hermes felt every gaze snap to her. Lord Jurgen grabbed Hermes by the shoulder, gratitude roaring in his voice as he thanked him for pulling Katya through her magical struggles. Hermes shrugs, insisting he only handed her the chance, and Jurgen, satisfied and vindicated, says trusting Hermes was the right call. Hermes snaps, "Why would Lord Jurgen trust me with no guarantees?" And Jurgen shrugs, saying he banked on the chance Hermes had connections to Fenribord. He poured his trust into Katya, and Hermes poured his in just as fiercely. Jurgen smirks, and says he has an idea who is Hermes' master, insisting only that woman could have bestowed such extraordinary magic. Jurgen drops a bomb. His late wife was tied to that mysterious woman, and he insists to Hermes that he alone linked the magic's origin to her. Hermes staggers as the bomb drops. Katya's mother might be the key to the secret behind his magic. Jurgen urged him to find Katya. Hermes walked off, mind racing as a cold truth landed. Jurgen wasn't ordinary. He'd spun those conclusions from nothing but words. As he approaches, the butler's voice cuts through the air, proclaiming his arrival to Katya. Hermes' eyes snap to Count Karl von Hartnett of the West as he strides up to Katya with a marriage proposal, claiming he's heard she's overcome her magical limits. Katya offers a polite refusal, but the Count insists she at least meet his son, and Hermes watches every detail with careful intensity. Katya slams the truth down. Her engagement to the second prince fell apart last month, and she begs Count Hartnett to reconsider his proposal. Brushing off her plea, the Count lauded Katya's razor mind and rare talent, slammed the prince for letting such a prize slip away, while Hermes stood silent and tight-lipped as the Count's relentless praise grated on him. The second prince erupts into the room, cutting their conversation dead with a predator's glare and a cold, suffocating aura. He demanded to know what they'd said about him, vowing to personally deal with anyone who dared mention his name. And Hermes' gaze snapped. Recognition hit him. The kingdom's second prince, Katya's former fiancé, the very man who'd personally ordered Hermes expelled, and shock washed over his face. Tension crackled as Hermes and the second prince locked eyes at the foot of the hall's staircase. Tension crackles in the air as Hermes locks eyes on the prince and realizes he's the man who personally cast him out. Tension crackled as a new figure, Sarah, materialized beside the prince. Katya froze, recognition striking like lightning. She knew her instantly. The second prince suddenly appears in the hall and draws every eye. Hermes freezes, wide-eyed. The guests erupt into whispers about his arrival, and the air crackles with tension. Recognition slams into Hermes. Aster, Katya's ex-fiancé, the man who drove her away many years ago. He has no idea why he's at Katya's celebration. Katya locks her gaze on Sarah and cuts him off before he can get a word out, and he reels at her bold initiative. The second prince Aster sneered that Katya was worthless, and accused Count Hartnett of proposing to her as a blatant act of contempt for his authority. Panic floods Hartnett as he frantically pleads that he only heard rumors. Spurning every feeble excuse, Aster storms the celebration and throws everyone out despite it being held in honor of his former fiancé. Prince Aster brands Karl von Hartnett a traitor, blasting his words and actions as proof he's plotting rebellion. Aster points at him before the whole room, publicly brands him a criminal, and declares he came to the party to erase that false impression. Karl panics, chokes out an apology, and flings frantic justifications, insisting it's all a misunderstanding as the guards pin him back in front of everyone. Prince Aster sneers at Katya's triumphs, taunting that sudden fame has blinded her, even after she shattered a magical flaw and wrested a rare artifact back from danger. He sneers at her achievements, brands them lies, and declares she isn't his fiancée. Katya snaps back, denying the charges, but Aster cuts her off with a hard, authoritative command. Aster erupts in fury, hurling the accusation that Katya twisted the conversation to serve her own ends. He cuts her off cold, rejects her in front of everyone, and vows he'll never marry her again. Katya refuses outright. Aster grins, reveals he's already found someone else, then brushes her off with cold contempt and icy indifference. Aster sweeps his new fiancée, Sarah von Hartmann, daughter of a noble family, into the room and proclaims her to everyone. The introduction hits cold and calculated as Sarah slides into Katya's old seat with a serious expression, and Aster pours on syrupy, over-the-top praise, insisting her beauty, shy charm, and magical talent outshine Katya's, even though she comes from a lower-status family. Katya stuns everyone by admitting she and Sarah were schoolmates, and the air crackles as their shared past claws its way back into the open. Katya's convinced Sarah isn't cut out to bear the crushing weight of being a royal's fiancé. Katya leans in and dares Sarah. "Do you have the guts to shoulder everything this role demands?" Katya's steely resolve stops Sarah cold, leaving her speechless. His Aster lunged in, fury flaring, desperate to cut the conversation off. Desperate to flip the script, Aster accuses Katya of once being jealous and cruel to Sarah, saying she weaponized her status to intimidate her at school. The accusation hits like a cannon blast. Everyone freezes, stunned into silence. The prince's words hit, and suspicion toward Katya erupts among them. Aster plants himself before everyone and proclaims he is telling the truth. And he corners Sarah, squeezing the truth from her until she confirms his accusations. Meanwhile, Katya realizes that no matter how fiercely they fight to defend themselves, their defenses won't hold. Not a soul there dared defy the prince's word. Cornered, Sarah falters, then reluctantly confirms the prince's words, doubt skittering across her face. Aster pounces, publicly accusing Katya and roaring that her true face has finally been revealed, and Prince Aster starts twisting the crowd to his will. They roared that the young woman, branded defective, couldn't possibly have truly awakened magic, and accused Katya of cheating. doubt rippled through the crowd as Hermes watched how easily everyone swallowed the prince's words. Out of nowhere, a colossal monster stomps into the assembly hall courtyard, sending the guests reeling. A guard throws himself at it, straining to hold it back as the creature's raw power turns the venue into immediate danger. Hermes and Katya, pulled by the chaos, sprint to the attack site and find a knight squared off against a massive, snarling wyvern. The wyvern's appearance ratcheted panic to a fever pitch as it loomed over everyone. Katya barked for Hermes to ready himself for battle, soldiers scrambling back from the danger, and amid the chaos, Prince Aster surged forward and challenged Sarah to prove her worth. She unleashed her magic, dazzling everyone. Katya's blood ran cold. This monster's arrival was staged, and Prince Aster, showing up at the perfect moment and leaping to lead the defense, screamed, "Trap!" The plan snaps into place like clockwork, and Sarah steels herself to strike. Sarah slams her palms into the ground and unleashes her ancestral magic right before everyone's eyes. She unleashed a potent healing spell. Soft silver light flooded the hall and mended the wounded in an instant, leaving everyone awestruck by her power. Sarah keeps chanting the incantation, her voice swelling into a fierce storm as raw magic crackles and sparks around her. She rips the lid off her secret, revealing a dual ancestral magic, and the crowd goes silent as she forges an even mightier spell, her power smashing every expectation. Even the prince reels at the discovery. Sarah unleashes her final spell and slams the worm into a blazing, unbreakable magical prison. The beast thrashes, but the bindings hold and it's completely bound. A shadowy stranger strides onto the scene and lavishes her with roaring praise for her achievement. He claims the rest. Then the prince erupts into summoning majestic magic, ringed by roaring flames and glowing sacred sigils, as his spell unfurls into a crushing aura of divine judgment. The prince unleashes his most powerful ancestral magic, Ahura Mazda, and a dazzling storm of energy explodes outward, swallowing the entire area. His confident gaze and arrogant smirk screamed victory. He stood ready to judge everyone, brandishing the absolute power he'd seized. The prince crowns the attack with a devastating strike of sacred flames, mercilessly incinerating the monster, as he coldly declares its fate was sealed the moment it dared to stand in his way. Flames ravenously engulf the monster. Its scream rips the air, then it crumbles to ash and vanishes. The power detonates with such ferocity that everyone reflexively flings up shields as a shockwave rips through the hall with staggering force. The monster slammed into the earth, charred and broken, smoke still curling from its ruin as the group watched the battle die in heavy silence, guests frozen by the raw power they'd just witnessed. Amid the crowd's roar, Prince Aster seizes the moment to stride into the spotlight, proclaim his authority to the nation, boldly announce his engagement to Sarah von Hartmann, and vow she will be the cornerstone of his future reign. The crowd erupts, hailing his strength like a national hero as Aster's announcement draws thunderous applause, while Hermes watches with a cold, critical eye and snaps that in this land blood and birth, hereditary magic, decide everything. Aster rules not by justice but by brute strength. And Hermes growls that no matter how fiercely they fight, the nobles will always prop up this crooked order. This is a mirror of a warped society. Hermes, memories crashing back, remembers his teacher's warning that the aristocracy has decayed into a class content with nothing but inherited privilege. Now comprehension strikes. The capital, dressed in prestige and power, is rotten with laziness, arrogance, and a sham sense of merit. And he stares with contempt, finally seeing how twisted the ruling system is.